Good morning. Executive education is something that, it's something which is not very common because you're really looking at dealing with people who are already right at the top in terms of maturity and experience. When you look at a leader, you look at the top of the organization, you expect them to have answers. You expect them to know, when there are uncertainties, you expect them to know what needs to happen. But this morning, when I was reading the newspaper, I decided to use a little bit of an article in my speech to start this discussion because I found it pretty interesting. And the article was a very simple article. It talked about disruptive change. So the article spoke about companies, and this was in Business Line, which is one of India's top business newspapers. It spoke about companies and it spoke about countries that were getting into this wave of change and how things were changing dramatically. Giving you an example that I think all of us are so used to hearing, Motorola was the first company that started the mobile industry. Where are they today? And what has taken up the industry? It's Samsungs or the Googles of the world because of technology. India 5 years back, and this was again quoted in the article, which is pretty ironical, 5 to 6 years back, we were poised as the second superpower after China. And today we are having articles that are getting flashed out in the newspaper saying that we might be the first BRICS country that might enter the junk status for investment. Kind of very topsy-turvy world that we are living in. But when I really went through that article and I saw, there was a little bit of hope in it as well. Where Gary Hamel, for those of us who don't know him, he is a professor at the London School of Business. He's been voted by one of the top, by Wall Street Journal, in fact, as the most influential management expert. He says that change at any level, it could be a country like India, it could be a company that is Motorola, or it could be any company or any country, it's possible if there is a reorganization in management. Very easily said. But then when I reflected, I realized reorganization in management means reorganization in strategy. It means rethinking what you already know and unlearning and relearning because things are changing diametrically. And I thought that was pretty interesting because today's discussion is not about people who don't know. We're talking about the cost of reinventing or relearning and what happens when it doesn't happen. Right? So we are already dealing with people at the top level, at top management levels, middle management levels, and I'm my speech has a lot to do with senior leadership. People who already know what there is to know, who have experienced diversity, but there is still a need for them to relearn. So let's go into this presentation and look a little bit at what's in store for all of us. I'm really going to be talking about leadership, organizational culture and profits. I come from a behavioral training industry, from Maersk Training, and we do a lot of work in this area. It's a particular pet subject for me. I also would like to talk a little bit about the cost of change, or the lack of it, and what can be addressed. So I hope it sounds interesting enough. So let's talk a little bit about the references, because I think it's very important that we know early on that this entire discussion is fairly scientific and based on research that has been done by, of course, some by my company, but a lot by Human Synergistics, which is a company that does a lot of culture measurement. I've worked with them to some extent, and they have scientific graphs which they use to measure culture, corporate culture and performance by Cotter and Heskett. It's a book, and they've done some fantastic survey in that book. And also the recent papers, which if you go on LinkedIn or you go on any other, social media, Zenker Folkman's paper, How Effective Leaders Double Profits. Again, very famous right now. So the iceberg is something that all of us are very familiar with. And in behavioral science, we talk about the iceberg from the concept of behaviors being the 5% that you see, and your values or your culture or your upbringing and your beliefs being the 95 that you don't. But I'm not talking about the iceberg in the sense of an individual. I'm talking about the iceberg in the sense of an organization. An organization's performance is only the 5% that is seen. The 95% that is not seen is the underlying culture, and I think that's not new news to everyone over here. So we're going to talk a little bit about the research that has been done on this culture. For that, I will take you to this slide. I would like you to focus a little on this. This is a circumplex that was brought out by Human Synergistics, where they actually went ahead to measure the various kinds of cultures that exist across organizations across the world. It was a very intensive study, and they categorized cultures into 3 types. The red, which they termed as aggressive or defensive, the green, which they termed as passive, and the blue, which they said was constructive. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes to talk to you about what each of these mean. The red really focuses on perfectionistic, so everyone has to be perfect. There is no room for mistakes. Competitive, we need to be a benchmark for our competition. We look outside and we get ourselves better looking at what's happening outside us. Power, it's important for us to be centers of power. So everyone strives to get that power. And because you strive to get power, there is a chance, in fact it is very true, that there is a lot of opposition that happens within this kind of culture. So that's, I'm going a little quickly on this. You can research on this and you will get a lot more information. I'm just giving you what I think would be interesting for you to go with me through this presentation. So if you look at the green style, which talks about the passive defensive style, this style strives towards approval. Everyone does what the leader likes. There's a lot of conventionalism, where norms are respected, the rules are followed, and change is not something that happens that easily. It's fairly dependent, in that sense hierarchical, because no one would want to take risks. So a lot of decisions happen based on what the top management decides, and it's also avoidant because again there is a sense of collectivism, but individual ownership might be lacking a bit. So that's typically what has been found about this culture. In blue, they talk about 4 attributes defining that culture. One is people strive to achieve. There is a drive to self-actualize every individual, meaning to say, what's in it for me if I do something, and an answer comes back for you. It's fairly humanistic and encouraging. There's a lot of collaboration, and it's affiliative. Now, these 3 styles, there was a lot of debate in terms of, what is good for an organization and what kind of a role does a leader play in driving or not driving each of these styles. So I'm going to hold these 2 questions. I'm going to answer the first one in terms of what does a leader do in terms of driving a style of culture. Before that, I would like to tell you that there is no organization where there's only one form of culture. It's human nature that we have everything. It's very important that we have all of them, because each one of them may have their pluses and their minuses, and that's what also was found in the culture study. But what was interesting is, and I will show that to you as it goes down, and I'll take you with me on this. So the CEO has a lot of red, if you look at the screen, a little bit of blue and a little bit of green. Any guesses on what happens at the next level? Anyone? I'm going to go ahead and put it. More of red, more of green, and less of blue. Because if you look at the CEO, he had more red, more green, and less of blue. But he had an almost equal amount of green and blue, right? Okay, so what do you think happens at the next level? All right. Okay. By the way, this is not something that I'm sharing with you. It is a live case that was measured. And they did it across 3 levels of the organization, and just look at that. Okay. So, clear case for the fact that leaders drive behaviors in an organization. So, let's see what the cost of these behaviors are, shall we? So, yes, as I said, change is driven by leadership. Let's go back to that slide let's go back to this one, the first one. And we said that in the case of a blue, we call it constructive. Just going back to that slide, a lot of research proves that blue is a very ideal style of managing an organization. And I'm not saying this for nothing. I will show you slides which substantiate what I'm saying right now. So it's important that we reflect from red or green, we tend to move towards blue. What I'm trying to show over here is that the top of the pyramid signifies the leader. Okay? So if the leader starts changing, an organization has the tendency to change with him or her. Okay. So why do we need to go to blue? What's so important about blue? The answer lies here. If you look at high performance cultures, and we're saying that in these cultures predominantly the 4 attributes that were there in the blue aspect are there. Look at the difference. I found everything pretty high. The revenue was plus 682, and this one is a study by Coda and Heskett over 207 firms over an 11-year period. Fairly long, fairly substantial. Talks about 682% in terms of constructive cultures, and the rest were at 166% in terms of revenue. I'm talking about growth over 11 years. You have 282% of work expansion that happens in high performance culture. Look at the difference versus 36%. But the biggest point of interest that I would like to draw to you is look at the net income. 756% in high performance cultures versus 1%. Okay, so this aspect has been discussed fairly exhaustively in that article by Zenger and Faulkman in terms of how effective leaders drive profits. They talk about this. They talk about the constructive and creative capabilities of culture and how it can dramatically improve business results. So I'm going to show you a couple more. So I'm expecting you to be skeptical over here and wonder, how does blue impact, right? So I'm showing you some cases where you can actually see how cultures have changed from a red to a blue. Can you see that on stage? And you can see how costs have come down or profits have gone up. It's pretty interesting. This one's a multinational oil and gas. The second one I'm just showing you a couple in the interest of time. But again, you look at it, the revenues go up by 36, incomes go up by 240, quarterly bonuses go up by 3,061% when there is a shift in the style of culture. So, just to recap what we've done till now, we spoke about culture. Yes?
Can I ask questions?
Once I'm done, sure. So we spoke about culture, we spoke about leaders driving culture, and we also spoke about this thing on creativity and constructive culture. I'd like to end this presentation with just one last slide. The bottom line is, if you invest in your leaders and if you give them the skills that they need, they can become extraordinary and they can more than double profits. I'm not saying this. Zenger and Faulkman said that. They even substantiated it with the research, which they did, where they did over 3 lakh 360-degree surveys across organizations across the world. And they landed up by saying that the bottom 10% of the poor leaders eat up almost $1.2 million. Whereas the top 10% give you $4.5 million. What was interesting about this research is that they also did try to rationalize this across industries, across organizations, and they found that this was the same all across. So with this, I'm just going to take a minute more to talk to you about what would you want to touch upon when it came to Exec Ed per me or per the surveys is, well, there's a lot of emphasis that is given on behavioral requirements. But really today, going back to the disruptive change management, it's time to really give leaders the ability at various levels in your organization to start thinking differently and start reorganizing themselves. A lot on mindsets and beliefs, a lot of unlearning and relearning, which is not the easy part, it's the toughest part. because you're really looking to recreate what you've already created. And where do we start? I think we really start by giving people an awareness. So starting at various levels of our organization. You know your LMS much better than anyone else. So you may want to look at it and understand how can we look at getting our cultures to get more constructive, creative and productive. And the leader drives it, so we do want to invest in that kind of education. I would like to end my conversation with you more than a speech. And I'm open to questions, if any, at this point in time. Yes.
Excuse me, can you use the mic, please?
Okay. We also have an exclusive question and answer session that comes at the end of all 4 presentations.
I have 2 questions. The first one, you talked about
It's not loud enough.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay, I have 2 questions. The first one, you talked about the blue part being the high performance culture.
Yes.
Now, that blue part you talked about being very collaborative. Yeah, a very collaborative culture.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, I have worked with various cultures from business, doing business from various with different cultures across organizations. And I found that too overly collaborative cultures where people keep on, waiting for, okay, they keep on having a lot of discussions, results in a lot of no decisions or very long decisions. So are we talking about that kind of culture, or I have misunderstood your?
Sure, I'm happy to clarify. Firstly, that the name of that culture is constructive. Collaboration is a part of it, but result orientation and all of that is also a very big part of it.
Okay.
So, as I said, it's a very short time frame to explain it to you, but what you spoke about typically happens in the passive defensive style, where there is a lot of discussion and there is a requirement for approval at various levels. That's, if I hear right.
That's true. That's true.
That comes under a different style. But the constructive style deals more with result generation.
Okay, understood. So the other question was in terms of the results.
You want to go back to any slide? 1 second.
Just go back.
See, looking at this one. Yes. Which results? These?
No, just go back. Last, in terms of, you had the slide on the values and beliefs. What should be focused on? And what you said was the focus should be less on behaviors and more on values and beliefs. And I think definitely yes, because I find that is a major driver. Mindset and values is a major driver for people in terms of performance. Yeah. Now, if you look at a lot of these psychometric studies, can you actually change a value and belief of a person? That's a very fundamental question. To how much extent you can change it, especially when it is part of your intrinsic part of your growth from childhood. It's part of your
Absolutely. I would say, so at an outset, is it possible to recalibrate a belief system? I would say yes. Is there a different type of way to communicate and train to get this to happen? I would say yes to that too. If you're looking at a conventional way of training where there is knowledge that is imparted, so if you really go, I would like to show you this one. So what you're asking me is, where does that come? How can you do it? Conventionally, if you're focusing on getting people aware, so that's where the behavior changes you're targeting. Okay, but where I'm going is, I'm saying it's not enough for people to get aware of things. People also need to be given the space to reflect and accept. A lot of times that never happens when a trainer trains. It happens when the participant decides to take that knowledge. So is it possible? It is possible. I have been part of some sessions like that, and we've also designed sessions like that. How does it happen? It happens when it is largely experiential, where you realize for yourself, and it's designed so that, there are a lot of elements to it. One of the main elements over there is the trainer would never talk for too long and give too much of information. So there's a little bit of psychology that comes in when you're designing these. Having said that, it is possible, it has been done. Does it happen in one session? No way. So it happens over a period of time. which is why all of these measurements have not happened when you start and you end a program or a learning intervention. It happens after a year or maybe 6 months where you go back and recalibrate to see if improvements have happened. You want to answer the question?